and I can record it. Let's start this now. Okay, go back here. It should be. There I am. Okay, so nothing on the board today or anything like that. But anyway, welcome back. We haven't streamed a Bible class in probably a little over a month. So just different things. December is always a little bit of a challenging month from all the different things. We didn't have class for a couple weeks, um, and for all the events that are going on. And uh, if you're watching this, or we'll watch it later, we'll try to do our best to keep things going, and probably try to do a better job of letting you know when we're not going to have a class or a uh, presented for you. Second Kings 5 is where we're at. So pull out your Bible. If you've got one of these, that will be helpful. But if you don't, that's okay. You can listen. We're not going to have a screen today. I did that deliberately a little bit because we start out that way, and I do like that format where we talk more and just look at it, because the whole key of this was that you can just use the Bible and study. You don't have to have a lot of bells and whistles. This Bible does have a lot of good, useful tools to it, but anyone can take their Bible and start studying. So we are in a story that's pretty popular, or it's well known, the story of Naaman. And so it starts off: Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master and in high favor, because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria. He was a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. So, what do we know from there about Naaman? Commander. So that would be equivalent of like a general, but not just a general. Generally, the commander of the army was it would be the highest ranking general. So he would be in charge of the whole military. Syria at this time was the equivalent of the superpower. It was the strongest army. Even at this time, Israel was the northern kingdom was somewhat of a subservient kingdom to Syria, and of course, the Syrians later would take Israel captive. Now, we deal a lot with Syria. Uh, Nineveh would have been in Syria, and remember, Jonah was sent to uh, Nineveh. Um, but basically, the truth of the matter is, Syria was a Gentile people. So this is a Gentile. He's someone that would have considered somewhat of an enemy, but yet they were on peaceful terms at this time. They kind of paid their allegiance to the kingdom of Syria, so they wouldn't be mad at him. But here we have Naaman, who is the head of the army. What's wrong with him, though? Leprosy. Got leprosy. And that wasn't a good thing to have back in the days. Now, leprosy, from what I've read, it's a lot of skin diseases were categorized into leprosy. And today there are still some areas where you have leprosy, but modern antibiotics and other things, it's not the disease it once was. So as long as you have access to modern antibiotics, it's not a scary disease anymore. Now, in some of your, third world countries and other things, and middle of nowhere, it could still be a very disturbing thing. But today's times, it's not really a strong issue for the world today, because we do have modern antibiotics. But when you didn't have them, it could spread pretty easily. And so, in the law of Moses, what if you were a leper? What did you have to do? To a certain city where lepers. Yeah, you had to isolate yourself. You could not be around other folks. You couldn't go in the temple. You couldn't go to synagogues. You couldn't. be around clean people because you would make them unclean, and there was a process. If somehow you recovered from your condition, you had to go to a priest, and they would offer up sacrifices, and there was a cleansing ritual dictated in the law of Moses. Remember when Jesus healed the lepers, and he told them to go to the priest, and indeed, that was something to be done, to be in accordance with the law of Moses. Remember, only one though came back and thanked Jesus for what he had done. But anyway, so it was a serious condition, uh, for the most part, especially if you got one of the bad forms, and it eventually would most likely lead to your death, but it would be a slow, gruesome death. It wouldn't be like it just things would rot away, things would it was just gruesome, and you were contagious. So as a result, uh, you weren't around. We'll say a little bit later. If you notice on your um, Thompson chain to the left of the chapter 5 beginning, you've got 2505, and that's Naaman. Not so much as interested in that as in the passage it has in that 2505, Luke 4:27, and we'll turn to that somewhere towards the end, just to see what how it is included in the New Testament. Anyway, so he was a man of valor, so that means he was a good guy. I mean, says now the Syrians on one of their raids had carried off a little girl from the land of Israel, and she worked in the service of Naaman's wife. So she was basically a slave. And she said to her mistress, "Would that my Lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria. He would cure him of his leprosy." So she said, if he was in Samaria, he could find the prophet, and that prophet could cure him. Now, before we read it, who do you think that prophet she's referring to is? Well, we'll see. Uh, but could cure him. Uh, so Naaman went in and told his Lord, "Thus and so spoke the girl from the land of Israel." And the king of Syria said, "Go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So once again, they had a peaceful relationship, but Syria was over Israel. And so as a result, the king of Syria sends the king of Israel a message that would have been taken seriously. So he went taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. Um, what was this for? By the way, clothing was a commodity in the Old Testament times. Most people may have had one outfit, and so it was costly to have it made. So 10 garments of clothing. Don't know how much it would have been worth. What probably didn't know what style of clothing. But anyway, that was a commodity. So that was part. Why was he taking all this with him? Now, before you comment, I want us to understand he obviously was traveling with the entourage. So that 10 talents of silver. If you look down, you can see a talent was about 75 pounds. Silver is trading at about $76 an ounce right now. When you multiply all that out, you get $912,000 worth of silver if you equate it in the modern exchanges today. Uh, I don't know how much you travel with when you go on a trip, but I doubt you take almost $1 million with you. At least I don't. Either. So, uh, but let's keep looking at this. 6,000 shekels of gold. Now, um, a shekel of gold is about 2/5 of an ounce, but 6,000 of it. So when you take 6,000 times 2/5 times gold is crazy right now. It is 4,400 something dollars an ounce. So when you multiply that out, you get 10.5 million roughly. So he has about $11.5 million plus the change of clothes. I don't know how much they were worth, but
Is that counting the silver too?
yeah, it'd be up to 12, almost 11 and a half with the silver. 10 and a half of just gold. So, um, why would someone? Why is he taking all this wealth with him?
Sound like you moving.
No,
Trying to get in favor with the king of Israel.
well, he doesn't give it to the king. Who's all this wealth for?
Elisha.
There you go, the prophet. So he's going to pay for a miracle. Uh, you know, and before you kind of say, well, you can't do that. Well, think about it. If I know Sophie has EDS, and we're waiting to get into a specialist. But if there was somebody we heard of that could cure it, not just deal with the symptoms, but could cure it, I mean, how much would that be worth to you? It'd be worth every dime you could drum up, and whatever you could get. I mean, you would want that. However, when we're dealing with God, it's not about money, is it? So we'll see that. But anyway, I just, sometimes we read about things like that and we don't equate to. Now, if you look at a exchange, it's going to say a lot lower because they're going to base it on what it was worth their money back then and how much their money back then should be. But it doesn't work that way, in my opinion, because that is an astronomical sum of money that he had with him. And my guess, the weight, it probably took several donkeys or mules to carry that kind of weight. And he probably had an entourage. Now, doesn't say that, but to carry that kind of money, it wasn't folding money where you could put it in a suitcase or something. I don't know if you can. I don't know how much you can get in a suitcase. It'd probably take a few suitcases to get almost $12 million. Um, and he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which read, "When this letter reaches you, you know that I have sent to you Naaman, my servant, that you may cure him of his leprosy." What's the problem there? Who's it implying is going to cure him? The king. Well, the king can't cure him. How's the king going to receive this? I think this was a troubling matter for the king. And so it says, and when the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes. That's generally a sign of mourning or great distress. He tore his clothes and said, "Am I God to kill and make alive? That this man sends word to me to cure a man of his leprosy? Only consider and see how he is seeking a quarrel with me." So, in other words, the king's taking like this as uh, he's got something against me. He's going to find issue and he's going to kill me because of this. I can't do this, And uh, but when uh, and so it says then in verse 8, but when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent to the king, saying, "Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come now to me, that he may know that there is a prophet in Israel." Well, that's who the girl actually told him to go to. She didn't tell him to go to the king. That was the king of Syria's idea. And we don't know how Elisha heard about it, but my guess is he obviously still had some wealth because he had servants and other things, and um, word got out. The king was distressed over this. And so Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stood at the door of Elisha's house. And Elisha sent a messenger, uh, you know, and what, Gehazi, yeah, Gehazi. But anyway, sent a messenger um, to answer the door. Let's see. Go and wash, saying, go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean. Okay, so let's put in perspective who these people are. Naaman is the leader of the entire army of Syria, the most powerful army in the world at this time. Really, the only person he would answer to is the king himself. Has immense wealth. It doesn't say he got this money from the king. Maybe the king did give him some money. I don't know. But he was a man of immense wealth, of immense stature. He was the type of man that if he told his soldiers to go, they went. I mean, he was a very important man. He was someone that the king of Israel was somewhat fearful. In fact, very afraid of. So I don't know what you would equate this to, but say the vice president came to Booneville, Arkansas, uh, and wanted to talk to the mayor. How he could help Booneville out or something. And the mayor sends out his secretary. And the secretary says, he's busy right now. He can't see. Uh, you know, but it was worse back then because, these were not elected people. These were people that got there by their uh, intelligence, their cunning, their ability to kill people, in essence, a soldier, and to command an army. And so he comes to this prophet's house. Like I say, Elisha may still had some money, and it may have been a nice house for that day, but it would have been nothing like the palaces where he was from, and probably even the palace he lived in. And the servant greets him and just tells him what to do. Now, what do you think Naaman's going to be feeling about that, thinking about that? Remember, he's probably the second most important person in the whole world at this time.
Yeah, but I think just one of these preceding scriptures in here, he had through his position and stuff, he thought a little more of himself than he should have.
Well, probably so. Probably
He
so.
thought he could probably
Buy his healing. He thought he could. He thought
he
there'd be something great. This man of God would come, probably bow down to him and say, "What can I do for you?" And it'd be just this grandiose event. And instead, he gets a slave, in essence, that answers the door and says, "Well, he said to go wash in the Jordan 7 times and you'll be clean." Probably then shut the door on his face. And so, anyway, but Naaman was angry and went away, saying, "Behold, I thought that he would surely come out to me and stand and call upon the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the place and cure the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" So he turned and went away in rage. Now,
verse 3 words of that verse there, after he was angry, went away saying, "Behold, I thought."
Yeah. How many people today? I thought God would surely, why would God allow this to happen to me? Surely I thought God would do this, or even, I like the fact that it says he was angry, but he thought that he'd do this grandiose thing. I mean, people want that in their religion today. They want some grandiose, the, uh, this big, huge band or orchestra playing the church music, and the preacher getting up there and acting like James Brown from the Blues Brothers movie, where he really gets into it, and you have all the people doing cartwheels and stuff, the over the top stuff, He was expecting that. He wanted that. How many people want that in religion today? They think, oh, that made me feel so good. That was awesome. And that's what they want from God. They want this feeling, but they won't just listen to what he says and the simplicity. And God doesn't look at people in their different roles, their different statures in life. And as a result, he was angry. Now, sometimes it takes someone that is a little lower level to kind of see the beauty in what was said. But his servants came near him and said to him, well, they did it respectfully, but they said, my father, it is a great word the prophet had spoken to you. What did the prophet actually say? You dip 7 times, you'll be healed. Now, Naaman couldn't see the forest for the trees. He all he had to do was simply believe what the prophet said and do it. And how great it is, it didn't take all this grandiose things. God doesn't require some big, huge, you know, uh, what do they call it? Like the Arabs, not the Arabs, but Muslims, they have to take a trip to Mecca sometime in their life. They have to go on this great pilgrimage. Some people think, well, you need to go to Jerusalem at least once in your life, or you need to do this and need to do this grandiose thing, that's so prominent. But God tells us simple things to do, does he not? And it's not to be shown. It's not to be seen. In other words, it's not something that's grandiose. And so the slave says, hey, this is great what the prophet's spoken to you. Will you not do it? Has he actually said to you, wash and be clean? Well, something, I guess, struck a nerve because I think Naaman actually was a good guy. And there was something different about him. First of all, had Naaman not been a good guy, I don't know that Elisha would have spent any time on him. But Naaman was a good guy. And I think it brought him down a notch when he heard this. He's the one that has leprosy. He's the one that needs God's help. Who is he to question how God does things? And so what does he do? So he went down and dipped himself 7 times in Jordan according to the word of the man of God, and his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. People question today, what's so special about the waters in that baptistry? Why do I have to be baptized? Surely if I believe, God can forgive me of my sins just on that. But what did Jesus say? Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved. Well, Lord, why don't you just say, you gotta go to church, you gotta read your Bible, you gotta, you know, uh, talk to others about Jesus, and you can be saved then, or do some type of, you know, grandiose thing. What's weird about it? If the Bible had things about doing something grandiose, a lot of people would do it. But it says something pretty simple, does it not? Through our faith, all we gotta do is dip or immerse ourselves in the water. By the way, that word dip in the Septuagint, it's the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. That word is bapto, root word of baptizo, and it means to immerse. He had to immerse himself in the water. And so we must immerse ourselves in the water. And it's through our faith, our obedient faith in doing the simplicity of what God has revealed to us. Same as Naaman. Now let's look real close, real quick. Let's go to Luke 4 and verse 27. Because I do find it interesting. Oh, I got a clock up there. The parallels. So this is early on in Jesus' ministry, but he is rejected in at Nazareth, is basically his hometown. And in verse 24, we'll get to it, says, uh, it said, "Truly I say to you, no prophet is acceptable in his hometown. But in truth, I tell you, were many widows in Israel in the days of Elijah, when the heavens were shut up 3 years and 6 months, and a great famine came over all the land. And Elijah was sent to none of them, but only to Zarephath in the land of Sidon, to a woman who was a widow." So Jesus, not being accepted in his hometown, they were wanting to know why he didn't do miracles there. Why are you not doing miracles there? And he points out Elijah during this famine, uh, the only one he came and helped was this widow inside. Once again, the significant thing there is she was a Gentile. You would think he would have helped people that were Israelites, but he helped out a lady that was a Gentile. And then verse 27, "And there were many lepers in Israel at the time of the prophet Elisha, and none of them were cleansed, but only Naaman the Syrian." Once again, a Gentile. Anyway, they didn't like what he said. Uh, to summarize the rest of that, but we see once again, uh, Naaman was healed. Now, I think miracles were always for a purpose to confirm the word of the speaker. Um, but I think there's also sometimes some extra reasons. We will see that this starts a kind of a thing to where I think maybe people like uh, Jonah, when he spoke to people in Nineveh, I think maybe there's probably some that knew about God. I'm sure a lot knew about God when Naaman came back, and credit was given to God. Uh, but anyway, let's. So in verse 15, because the story's not over. Once again, how much money did he have with him? Yeah, millions. Millions. Well, so then he returned to the man of God, he and all his company. And he came and stood before him and said, "Behold, I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel. So accept now a present from your servant." Now, so once again, this is why he brought it. But he thought he could buy it, but he recognizes that the true God did this. And so as a act of gratitude, he wants to give it to Elisha. Oftentimes, people I think misunderstand the purpose of giving in the church monetarily. Uh, we do it to be where we can take care of our own through benevolence. We do it where we can, our facilities, wherever they may be, you've got to have expenses for that. Um, Minister, missionary works, so we take up collections for that. But does God need our money? No, he don't need our money. I mean, he can, it becomes God's money when it becomes church's money, but God don't need our money. If so, Jesus wouldn't have pointed out how great that widow was that gave the 2 mites. It's not about how much you give; it's that you give. But God doesn't need our money to carry on the work of the church. There's a lot of places in the world that are very impoverished. Third world countries. There's some churches in some of those places that are thriving. Is it because they have money? No. In fact, if they ever think that, that's probably when they won't do so well. So uh, God doesn't need our money. So Elisha apparently he did okay. Did he need the money? No, not really. Now, how many of us, though, out of gratitude, somebody comes and Well, man, you helped me out in a pinch. Here, I've got $10 million here laying around. Why don't you take it? Would any of us refuse it? Now, uh, what's the problem with money? Can everybody handle that kind of money? No. Money tends to corrupt you if you're not really well prepared and suited to deal with that. I've known people that had a lot of money, and I would talk to this one guy. He's since passed on, and he'd talk about the burden that he had sometimes because not only did he have a lot of money, everybody in town had figured out that he had a lot of money. So he'd get people coming to him. I just need this for that. Need this for that, and he helped out a lot of people. One time, for example, uh, the church had been wanting to expand their parking lot at the church building, and there was a lady that lived in a house, and she said, "I'm going to live there till I die." And so he went and talked to the lady so that it wouldn't get passed to kids or passed to whoever and then used for something else. And he gave her, I think, $30,000. It is a little shack. It was just a little big thing. He gave her 30,000. He wrote her a check for $30,000. Said, "I know you can," and she was very poor. I said, "I know you can use this money now." Said, "As long as you live, stay in the house." But he drew up some paperwork. When you die, the church will take over, and we can do with it as we need. And that's what he did. He didn't tell anybody he did that. But when she died, sure enough, that's what he did. Now, but it was a burden, and it became a thing. I had to do some lessons from time to time. Like a missionary would come, and or something would come up, and they needed money. They'd be like, "Oh, Brother Charles, he can just pay for it." And a lot of times he would in the past, and I'd say, "No, that ain't the way to do it." I said, "Let's take up a collection. Everybody give their part, and then if there's any remaining, Charles can, you know, take care of the difference." Because we're to each give our own. We're each to, proportional amount. You know, uh, someone that's very wealthy can give a lot more than I can, but I still, just because they can cover you doesn't mean you don't have that. So anyway, money can be a distraction for a lot of people because it's just, it would change you. If you all of a sudden had $100 million in the bank tomorrow, that would change you. Now, wouldn't all be for bad. Don't get me wrong, but it money is not what's going to make you happy. Money is not what's going to make you a better Christian. It's going to make some things easier, but it's also going to make some things that might not be good easier. So anyway, so he wanted to give it to Elisha. Um, let's see. Oh, okay. Here we go. In verse 16, but he said, "As the Lord lives, before whom I stand, I will receive none." And he urged him to take it, but he refused. Okay. Then Naaman said, "If not, please let there be given to your servant 2 mule loads of earth. For from now on your servant will not offer burnt offerings or sacrifice to any god but the Lord. In this matter may the Lord pardon your servant when my master goes into the house of Rimmon to worship there, leaning on my arm, and I bow myself in the house of Rimmon. When I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, the Lord pardon your servant in this matter." He said, "Go in peace." So, he said, because the king, that's who his master was, goes in this, and I, as the commander of the army, have to go in with him. I want you to say, that's not going to be held against me. And Elisha basically did that. But when Naaman had gone from him a short distance, so what does money do? Well, here's what money does. That kind of wealth. Yeah. Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said, "See, my master has spared this Naaman the Syrian, and not accepting from his hand what he brought. As the Lord lives, I will run after him and get something from him." So Gehazi followed Naaman, and when Naaman saw someone running after him, he got down from the chariot to meet him and said, "Is all well?" And he said, "All is well. My master has sent me to say, there have just now come from me from the hill country of Ephraim 2 young men of the sons of prophets." Now, what is this?
Story.
He's lying, yeah. Why is he lying? Well, he wants some money. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of clothing. Why do you think he chose so little? When he had 10 talents of silver, and he had over $10 million of gold. Why do you think he chose so little?
He had to make it sound good.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah. See, that would have been less than $100,000. But now that's a lot of money. Why do you think he chose so little? Make it sound good. Yeah. Well, he could have came up with more people needed it. Why do you think he chose so little? If you have, and this becomes a problem with criminals. So if you had $12 million, how do you hide it? What do you do with it? It becomes pretty obvious you've got $12 million at some point by the things you're able to buy and do. 100,000 or a little less than that. I probably thought, well, I can. Yeah, it won't be that noticeable. That's what gets a lot of criminal activity is they've got to launder it, and it gets tough to launder when you're getting up to big time money because you have audits, you have IRS looking at things, and it gets more tricky when you have too much money. You might just have to store it somewhere, and then if the government finds out about it, law enforcement they take it off. So, uh, so I think he asked for a small amount because he didn't think anyone would ever notice. Now, when we do stuff like that, he lied and then he thought he could basically take money that wasn't his and no one would ever notice. But who always knows? God always knows. So, today people do things, you know, no one will ever know this. I can do this and no one will know it except for me. Well, yes, someone always knows. So, huh,
Got to one person that won 1.9 trillion dollars
it'd
off the
be,
lottery.
yeah, billion, 1.9 billion.
What's he gonna do to hide it?
You can't hide it. You can't. When you get that much money, you can't hide it.
It's going to drive him crazy. won't it?
People going to drive him crazy. He's going to have a private line. He's going to have to hire all these people. He's going to have to trust that he hires people, the right people. And even with that amount of money, he's going to have to be careful what he does with it, because most people that win the lottery, they're bankrupt in 5 years.
He'll be gone in no time.
Just because they start giving this person money, that person money. They start buying all these exotic cars. They buy, all these things that don't accumulate wealth because they don't know nothing about it. So,
Become taxable.
yes, the best thing he could do is take a little over half of it and put it in some type of mutual fund or money market type thing and just let it sit. Because he'll go through the rest. And most people will. Anyway, so Gehazi, he thinks I can handle 100,000, and no one will ever know. And Naaman said, "Be pleased to accept 2 talents." He asked for one. Naaman says 2. And he urged him and tied up 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 changes of clothing and laid them on 2 of his servants, and they carried them before Gehazi. So he's got about $200,000. Well, that's better than 100,000. And so anyway, he takes it. I'm not sure how he explained the nice new clothing he had, but and when he came to the hill, he took them from their hand and put them in the house. and sent the men away, and they departed. He went in and stood before his master, and Elisha said to him, now, okay, how many miraculous things has Gehazi seen Elisha do? You remember a couple weeks ago, or that was maybe what you missed. Uh, remember you had the lady that he used to stay at. She made this place on a roof where he'd stay, and he Gehazi's the one, remember, that's told him, hey, she doesn't have a son, and her husband was old, and so he told her, next year you'll have a son, and then the son at some point a few years down the road dies, and she takes her mule or whatever, and she goes as fast as she can to get to the prophet. And anyway, he takes his cloak. Gehazi takes that, puts it at the feet of the boy that's dead. And Elisha raises the boy from the dead through the power of God. Gehazi saw it all. He wasn't thinking clearly, was he? Once again, who did see what he did? God. Well, Elisha was a mighty man of God, a prophet who God spoke to, who God did these incredible miracles through. So anyway, he went and stood before his master, and Elisha said to him, where have you been, Gehazi? Okay. Now, what do you think Elisha is asking? And I think this shows the long suffering of God and the willingness to forgive people. Gehazi's going to have one last opportunity to come clean and beg for forgiveness. And he said, your servant went nowhere. Now, what happened to Ananias and Sapphira when they lied to Peter in the presence of the Holy Spirit in the New Testament? Yeah, like that. He actually comes across maybe a little more lenient than that. But he said to him, did not my heart go when the man turned from his chariot to meet you? Was it a time to accept money and garments, olive orchards and vineyards, sheep, oxen, and male servants and female servants? So what's the punishment? Therefore, the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and to your descendants forever. So he went out from his presence a leper like snow. So his greed cost him. Naaman came for good reasons. Naaman's money, although it may have been to buy a miracle, it was going to be given as a gift. And he was happy to give it because he realized the true God. Gehazi, out of his greed, wanted some money. Lied about things to Naaman, took the money, and then when his master asked him, gave him a chance to come clean, he denied it. How tough that probably was for Elisha. Don't know how long Gehazi had been with him, but it's an illustration. Now, I'm sure some people, and I'm sure there was some lessons probably in the early church that was told to people, especially from Jewish backgrounds. Well, Naaman was an unclean Gentile. Gehazi was a Israelite. Had done many good things for God, I'm sure, as a servant of Elisha. And yet it is
At least
witness. Well, apparently he was a good. I mean, I think if you read closely there, what did he say? I've already shut my Bible. What did he say? How his heart, what did he say? How did he phrase it, Elisha? How my heart turned when I saw you. So it hurt him. So that to me implies that Gehazi had been a good and faithful servant, had most likely done all that he should, and yet this temptation was more than he allowed it to be more. All he had to do is just let him go. And then when you make a mistake, what's the lesson learned from there? Come clean. At least he didn't do, a lot of people in the Bible, you'll see they get caught. What do? They tend to blame something else.
That's not repentance.
No, that's not repentance. King Saul, the people, Samuel, you know what they're like. You're the king, dude. So anyway, I think this is a great example just of obedience out of faith, even if we don't understand why. It does. And a lot of people grapple with this. Why did Jesus have to die on the cross? Well, that is a tough one to grasp. But I know God said he had to. Jesus said he had to. In fact, it said there was no other way. And if you can't contemplate why, it doesn't really matter. It was just the case. Don't argue with me, argue with God, and that doesn't work out well for you. Why do I have to be baptized? I believe Jesus. I believe God. I'm a good person. I don't do this. I don't do that. That's how a lot of people talk. But what did God simply say for us to do? He told us to repent and be baptized, Acts 2:38. He told us that baptism now saves us in 1 Peter 3:21. On and on the verses go. And, even after you become a Christian, that doesn't change things. Like I say, Gehazi had been probably a good and faithful Israelite up to that point. But God's standards always you do the right thing, and when you don't, you beg for forgiveness. And Gehazi's greed left him with leprosy, and apparently his whole family. So that would be a very much of a curse back in the day, especially for an Israelite that was trying to be faithful to God. Okay, I think what time do we got here? Oh yeah, it's time. We'll go ahead and say goodbye to the online world, and we'll be back next week to see more of the adventures of Elisha and do a lot more studying. If you ever have any questions, just email me at jimmypreach@gmail.com, and I'll try to get to